"Oh, I'm sure you borrowed this car, right, Officer Travis?" Cole's voice carried a sharp edge of mockery as he slowly circled the gray sedan, his boots crunching deliberately against the gravel shoulder. He let out a dry laugh, glancing briefly toward his partner as if inviting her to share the joke. "Step out of the vehicle," he added, tapping 2 fingers against the window, not impatiently, but dismissively. The black woman behind the wheel did not respond immediately. Her calm expression only seemed to irritate him more. Cole tilted his head, smirking faintly. License registration. And maybe an explanation. When she finally stepped out, he looked her up and down, lingering just long enough to make the judgment obvious. "Nice car," he muttered, not as a compliment. His hand rested casually near his holster. Not necessary, but intentional. A second officer crossed her arms, watching closely. A passing driver slowed. Another stopped completely. Phones began to rise. Then the moment shifted. A truck door opened behind them. A man stepped forward with quiet precision, scanning, calculating, assessing. His voice was calm, measured, respectful. "Ma'am." And suddenly, the tone of the entire encounter changed, because in less than 60 seconds the officers would realize they hadn't just misjudged a stranger. They had underestimated someone whose composure had been forged in places far more dangerous than this roadside. Comment where you're watching from and what time it is in your city. And if you believe respect should never be optional, stay with this story until the end. Danielle Brooks had always believed that composure was a form of armor. At 34 years old, she carried herself with a quiet steadiness that most people could not quite define, but always seemed to notice. Her movements were precise, economical, never rushed. Even when she smiled, it was measured not distant, not cold, but intentional. People often described her presence as calming, without understanding why. Danielle lived in Alexandria, Virginia, in a modest but elegant townhouse, tucked into a tree-lined neighborhood just far enough from Washington, D.C., to feel peaceful, yet close enough to remind her daily of the machinery of power constantly in motion. Her mornings followed a rhythm shaped by discipline rather than habit. She woke at 5:30 a.m., without an alarm. Coffee black. 10 minutes of silence. No phone. No news. Just stillness. She often stood near the kitchen window, watching the sky slowly transition from deep blue into pale morning light, allowing her thoughts to settle before the demands of the day began. Structure gave her clarity. Clarity gave her control. Her wardrobe reflected the same philosophy. Neutral tones, tailored cuts, nothing excessive, nothing careless. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, she wore a charcoal blazer layered over a soft ivory blouse, paired with dark-fitted trousers, and low heels practical enough for movement, but refined enough for any professional setting she might unexpectedly find herself in. Everything Danielle wore served a purpose. Nothing distracted. Nothing invited unnecessary attention. At least that was the intention. Her colleagues knew her as exceptionally reliable, the kind of professional who never spoke just to fill silence. Yet when she did speak, decisions tended to follow. Danielle worked as a senior logistics analyst for a private defense consulting firm, contracted on federal projects requiring absolute precision and discretion. Her job rarely involved public recognition. In fact, confidentiality agreements ensured that most people in her life had only a vague understanding of what she actually did. When asked, she would simply say, "I help systems run more efficiently." It was technically true, but incomplete, because the systems Danielle optimized often involved coordination across multiple agencies, time-sensitive resource allocation, and contingency planning for scenarios most civilians never had reason to imagine. She understood infrastructure the way musicians understand tempo. Every delay had consequences. Every oversight created vulnerability. Every decision mattered long before anyone realized something had gone wrong. Her work required anticipation, the ability to map outcomes before they became visible. And above all, emotional discipline. Especially emotional discipline. Her supervisor once described her as someone who sees 10 moves ahead without appearing to move at all. Danielle appreciated the compliment, but she never relied on praise to define her sense of worth. She had learned long ago that external validation could disappear without warning. Control had to come from within. That Tuesday had been unremarkable. A routine project review meeting, minor adjustments to a supply chain timeline, an encrypted briefing packet requiring her analysis before the end of the week. Nothing dramatic. Nothing urgent. She left the office at precisely 4:05 p.m., declining an invitation from co-workers to join them for drinks. Not because she disliked socializing, but because she valued routine more than spontaneity during active project cycles. Consistency reduced variables. Variables introduced risk. Her silver-gray sedan reflected the late afternoon sun as she merged onto Route 1, the familiar hum of the engine blending into the quiet classical piano playing through the car's speakers. Traffic was light. The sky was clear. Everything about the drive felt ordinary. Comfortably ordinary. Danielle maintained a steady speed, hands resting lightly on the wheel posture, upright but relaxed. She had driven this route hundreds of times. Every traffic light timing, every merge lane, every subtle curve in the road was already mapped in her mind. Predictability created efficiency. Efficiency created calm. Her phone remained face down in the center console, notifications silenced. Danielle believed that divided attention was rarely worth the illusion of productivity. She preferred full presence in whatever moment she occupied, even if that moment appeared uneventful. As she approached a gradual bend near a stretch of older brick storefronts, she noticed flashing lights in her rearview mirror. Blue. Intermittent. Persistent. At first, she assumed the patrol vehicle intended to pass. She signaled and shifted slightly right, allowing space. But the lights remained directly behind her. Then came the brief chirp of a siren. Short, decisive, directed. Danielle felt the smallest shift in her chest. Not fear, not yet simply awareness. She checked her speed. 32 miles per hour in a 30-mile zone. Seatbelt secured. Turn signal functioning. No phone in hand. No sudden lane changes. Everything in compliance. She guided the vehicle calmly toward the shoulder, choosing a wide, visible area with ample space for safety, something she had learned was always advisable. Visibility prevented misinterpretation. Misinterpretation created escalation. She placed the car in park, turned off the engine, lowered the driver's side window halfway, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. Visible. Still. Predictable. Prepared. The police cruiser stopped behind her, with controlled precision tires settling against the pavement as the flashing lights continued their rhythmic pulse. Danielle inhaled slowly through her nose, exhaled evenly through her mouth. Control your breathing. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. It was a phrase she had heard many times before, though rarely spoken in environments like this one. In her side mirror, she observed the driver's door of the cruiser open. A tall officer stepped out. White male, late 30s. Measured stride, though there was an edge in the pace suggesting something more than routine procedure. His hand adjusted the front of his vest as he approached, his gaze fixed not on the vehicle first, but on her. Danielle noticed. She always noticed. A second officer remained seated inside the cruiser, speaking briefly into the radio. Passing vehicles slowed slightly as drivers instinctively assessed the situation before continuing on their way. Routine traffic stop. Ordinary scene. Except for the subtle tightening in the air that Danielle could already feel forming the quiet shift in tone that most people overlooked until it was too late to correct. The officer stopped just behind her rear door, positioning himself in a way that allowed him clear visibility of both her hands and the interior of the vehicle. Standard protocol. Yet something in his expression suggested evaluation beyond procedure. Danielle kept her posture steady. Calm was contagious, but so was suspicion. And she had learned that sometimes the outcome depended entirely on which emotion entered the interaction first. The officer stepped closer to the window, paused, looked at her again. Longer this time, as if recalibrating an expectation that had already formed before he even reached the car. Danielle offered a polite nod. Professional, neutral, respectful. She spoke first. Good afternoon, officer. Her voice was clear, even, unthreatening. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke further. But Danielle sensed immediately. This stop was not going to unfold as routinely as it should have, and somewhere behind her, another vehicle was beginning to slow. Officer Travis Cole stopped beside the driver's side window but did not immediately speak. Instead, he leaned slightly forward, resting one hand casually on the upper edge of the door frame, his posture deliberately intrusive just enough to signal authority without technically violating procedure. His eyes moved quickly, scanning the interior of the sedan with an intensity that felt disproportionate to the situation. Clean upholstery, organized console, no visible clutter, no obvious signs of distress. Still, something about his expression hardened rather than relaxed. License and registration, he said, finally, his tone flat, almost bored. Danielle nodded once. Of course. Her movements were slow and deliberate as she reached toward her purse resting neatly in the passenger seat. She narrated her actions calmly, her voice steady. My license is in my wallet. Registration is in the glove compartment. Cole gave a small shrug that might have been permission. Or impatience. Danielle opened the glove compartment, carefully retrieving the folded document before handing it over together with her license. Cole glanced at the license briefly, then again, then once more longer this time. Danielle Brooks, he read aloud, as though testing the name for inconsistencies. His eyes lifted from the plastic card to her face, then back down again. You live in Alexandria? Yes, sir. He studied the address another moment, his lips pressing together slightly. This your vehicle? Yes. You purchased it yourself, yes. There was a pause just long enough to feel intentional. Cole looked around the car again, his gaze lingering on the dashboard, the stitching of the seats, the subtle details suggesting a vehicle maintained with care. You mind telling me where you're coming from today? From work. What kind of work? Danielle did not hesitate. I'm a logistics analyst. Cole tilted his head, as if the answer required interpretation. For who a consulting firm? What kind of consulting operational efficiency? His mouth twitched slightly. That sounds vague. It's often confidential. Cole's eyebrows lifted faintly. Convenient. Danielle did not respond to the remark. Silence, she had learned, often revealed more about the other person than any argument could. Cole glanced back toward the patrol car briefly, where Officer Megan Hill was now stepping out, adjusting her radio as she approached. Hill's expression was neutral, but alert, her gaze shifting between Danielle and Cole, as if assessing whether she was entering a routine stop or a developing situation. Cole handed Danielle's documents to Hill without explanation. Hill examined the license, then the registration. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Danielle. Back to the documents, then back again. "You've been pulled over here before?" Hill asked. "No. You sure about that?" "I'm sure." Cole shifted his weight, one hand now resting lightly on his duty belt thumb, hooked near the edge of his holster. Not gripping, but close. "Reason I stopped you," Cole said, his voice taking on a slightly more formal tone. "Your rear plate looked partially obstructed from a distance." Danielle nodded once. "I wasn't aware of that." "We see that a lot," Hill added, her tone carrying an undercurrent that Danielle could not quite place. "Sometimes drivers modify their plates." "I have not modified anything," Danielle replied, calmly. Cole's gaze drifted again across the interior. "You traveling alone?" "Yes." "No one else in the vehicle?" "No. No one else associated with the vehicle." Danielle paused a fraction of a second. "I'm not sure what you mean." Cole exhaled slowly, as though her response had complicated something unnecessarily. "I mean, is this car registered only to you?" "Yes." "Fully yes." Cole tapped two fingers lightly against the roof of the sedan, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You'd be surprised how often people hesitate on that question." Danielle met his gaze steadily. "I'm not hesitating." Hill shifted her stance slightly, her boots scraping softly against the pavement. "You said you work in consulting," she said. "Yes." "What company?" "I'm not authorized to discuss client names." Hill's lips pressed together faintly. Cole gave a short breath that might have been a quiet laugh. "That's a new one." Danielle remained composed. Passing traffic continued to move steadily, though several drivers slowed just enough to glance toward the scene. One vehicle reduced speed significantly before continuing forward. Cole noticed. He always noticed. "You mind stepping out of the vehicle for a moment?" he said. Danielle considered the request carefully. For what reason, Cole's jaw shifted slightly. "Standard procedure." "I would like to understand the reason." Cole's eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. "I just explained it. You mentioned a possible plate obstruction." "Yes. Does that require me to exit the vehicle?" Cole's fingers tapped once more against the roof. "It requires cooperation." "I am cooperating." Hill stepped slightly closer. "It's a simple request, ma'am." Danielle opened the door slowly, exiting the vehicle with measured calm. She closed the door gently behind her, ensuring her hands remained visible at waist level. Cole's eyes followed every movement. Not casually. Carefully. Evaluating. "You can step over here," he said, gesturing toward the front of the sedan. Danielle complied without hesitation, positioning herself where directed. Hill moved toward the passenger side, peering through the window. Cole's gaze lingered on Danielle's posture, her clothing the controlled rhythm of her breathing. "You seem very calm," he observed. "I believe calm communication is productive." Cole tilted his head slightly. "People usually ask more questions. I asked the necessary ones." Hill tried the passenger door handle. Locked. She glanced toward Cole. He gave a small nod. Hill stepped back. Cole folded his arms loosely, studying Danielle again. "You ever been arrested, Ms. Brooks?" "No." "Ever been detained?" "No." "You sure?" "Yes." Cole inhaled slowly through his nose. "You understand we deal with a lot of situations where people don't tell the full story." "I understand. You got anything in the vehicle we should know about?" "None. No weapons. None. No controlled substances. Number Hill's radio crackled briefly with unrelated dispatch chatter. Cole's attention did not shift. You mind if we take a quick look inside the vehicle? Danielle paused. I do not consent to a search. Cole's expression changed subtly, but unmistakably. Hill looked up from the passenger side window. Cole nodded slowly, as though confirming an internal assumption. Step forward to the hood, he said. Danielle complied, placing her hands lightly on the warm metal surface. Passing traffic continued. But one vehicle behind the patrol car had now come to a complete stop. Engine idling. Driver watching. Danielle sensed it without turning her head. Cole noticed it too. His hand moved closer to his holster. Not yet gripping, but no longer resting casually. And the air between them shifted. Slightly heavier. Slightly tighter. As if something unseen had entered the space between procedure and presumption. Behind the patrol car, a dark pickup truck door opened quietly. No one noticed. Not yet. The metal of the hood was still warm from the afternoon sun, radiating a steady heat through the fabric of Danielle Brooks's blazer as she placed her palms flat against the smooth surface. Her fingers remained spread and relaxed exactly as instructed. Her breathing stayed even, slow, controlled. Officer Travis Cole positioned himself slightly behind her left shoulder, close enough to assert authority, far enough to maintain tactical advantage. It was the stance of someone trained to anticipate resistance even when no resistance had been shown. Passing vehicles continued to slow as drivers instinctively sensed tension gathering along the roadside. A minivan rolled by more slowly than necessary, the driver's gaze lingering. A delivery truck reduced speed, then accelerated again, as if deciding involvement was not worth the risk. Danielle kept her focus forward. Stillness, she knew, could often interrupt escalation. Officer Megan Hill moved methodically along the passenger side of the sedan, bending slightly to peer through the window. Her reflection shifted across the glass as she adjusted her angle, scanning the interior with an intensity that suggested she expected to find something concealed in plain sight. Interior looks clean, Hill said, though her tone carried uncertainty rather than reassurance. Cole did not respond immediately. Instead, he studied Danielle's posture again. Her shoulders squared, but not rigid. Her chin level, her hands unmoving. You keep your car very organized, he said. I value efficiency. That right? Yes. Cole shifted slightly closer. You in some kind of hurry today? No. You seemed eager to pull over. I chose a safe location. Hill tried the rear passenger door handle. Locked. She circled toward the driver's side rear door, glancing briefly toward Cole for silent confirmation before testing that handle as well. Locked. Danielle spoke calmly without turning her head. The vehicle automatically locks when placed in park. Cole's jaw tightened faintly. You're very precise with your answers. I try to be accurate. Hill stepped back toward the front of the vehicle. You said you're a logistics analyst, she said. Yes. For a consulting firm. Yes. You carry any company identification in my wallet. Cole extended a hand. Go ahead and retrieve it. Danielle paused. My wallet is inside the vehicle. Cole watched her closely. You can reach in slowly. Danielle nodded. She stepped carefully toward the driver's side door, opening it with controlled movement, narrating her actions as she reached toward the purse resting on the passenger seat. I'm retrieving my wallet. Cole remained just behind her, his posture alert. Danielle removed a slim leather card holder and handed it back. Cole examined the contents briefly. Corporate identification, professional photo, minimal information, No obvious details regarding project assignments. Hill glanced over his shoulder. This doesn't say much. It confirms employment, Danielle replied. Cole's eyes remained on the card. Consulting covers a lot of ground. Yes. You ever work with law enforcement indirectly? Cole looked up. What does that mean? It means my work sometimes intersects with public sector systems. Hill folded her arms lightly. That sounds intentionally vague. It is intentionally respectful of confidentiality agreements. Cole handed the card back without comment. His eyes drifted once more across the interior of the sedan. Minimalist. Disciplined. Predictable. None of it aligned with the assumptions forming in his mind. He glanced briefly toward Hill again. A subtle exchange passed between them. Unspoken, but understood. Cole gestured toward the hood again. Return to your position. Danielle complied, without hesitation, placing her hands once more against the metal surface. Cole moved closer this time. Have you consumed alcohol today? No. Prescription medication? No. Any substances that might impair judgment? No. Hill stepped slightly to Danielle's right side, her presence closing the space further. You seem unusually calm, Hill said. I believe composure improves communication. Cole gave a small exhale through his nose. Most people get nervous. I have no reason to be nervous. Cole tilted his head slightly. Everyone has something. Danielle did not respond. Silence again. The kind of silence that magnified every small sound, the distant hum of traffic, the brief crackle of Hill's radio, the faint rustling of leaves carried by a light breeze. Cole shifted his weight. You mentioned confidentiality, he said. Yes. That ever conflict with cooperating with law enforcement? No. You sure about that? Yes. Hill circled slightly closer, lowering her voice just enough to create the impression of privacy without actually offering any. You understand, refusal to answer questions can raise suspicion. I have answered your questions. Cole's fingers brushed the edge of his holster briefly, not gripping, but acknowledging its presence. What about prior addresses, he asked. I have lived in Virginia for 6 years. Before that, Maryland. Before that, Georgia. You move frequently. My assignments required flexibility. Hill raised an eyebrow slightly. Assignments? Projects. Cole studied her face carefully. You work government contracts. I support operational systems. That's not what I asked. It is the answer I am permitted to provide. Cole took a slow breath. Passing vehicles continued to glance toward the scene. A cyclist slowed, looked back once, then continued down the shoulder. The pickup truck behind the patrol vehicle remained stationary, engine idling quietly, unnoticed. For now. Cole adjusted the small microphone clipped near his shoulder. You mind if we verify some information? You may verify anything legally available. Hill stepped back slightly, speaking softly into her radio. Cole remained focused on Danielle. You understand routine stops don't usually involve this many complications. I have complied with each request. Cole's eyes narrowed slightly. You declined consent for a search. I exercised my legal right. Hill's radio crackled faintly. She listened, nodded once, then looked toward Cole. Her expression had changed slightly. Not alarm, not certainty, but something closer to caution. Cole noticed. You getting anything, he asked quietly. Hill hesitated. Just confirming information. Cole turned his attention back to Danielle. You ever received specialized training? He asked. Danielle paused for the first time since exiting the vehicle. Yes. Cole's posture shifted. What kind of training? Danielle's voice remained even. The kind that emphasizes situational awareness. Cole held her gaze. For a moment, neither moved. Behind the patrol car, the pickup truck door closed softly. Footsteps approached slowly along the pavement. Measured, deliberate, unhurried. Danielle sensed the change in the air before she heard the voice. Cole's hand rested more firmly against his holster now. Not drawn, but no longer casual. Something in the atmosphere had shifted from procedural to uncertain. And uncertainty, Danielle knew, often made people reveal more than intention ever would. Hill glanced briefly past Cole's shoulder. Her eyes focused on something behind him. Something approaching. Something neither officer had yet fully registered. The next 30 seconds would change the tone of the entire encounter. The late afternoon air had shifted from ordinary to tense, so gradually that most passing drivers could not pinpoint the exact moment when the situation stopped feeling routine. Yet for those standing within the invisible boundary of the encounter, the change was unmistakable. Danielle Brooks remained still, palms resting lightly against the warm hood of her sedan, fingers relaxed, shoulders neutral. She did not look over her shoulder. She did not attempt to track the subtle movements behind her. Her focus remained forward, her breathing measured in steady intervals she had practiced many times before. Control the moment. Do not react to uncertainty. Let the environment reveal itself. Officer Travis Cole's stance had subtly hardened. His right thumb rested against the strap of his holster, now no longer a casual gesture, but a position prepared for escalation. His jaw flexed slightly as he watched Danielle's posture with an intensity that seemed less about safety and more about confirmation of an assumption he had not yet fully articulated. Officer Megan Hill lowered her radio slowly, her eyes still scanning Danielle's profile, as if searching for evidence that would justify the rising tension. "You mentioned prior training," Cole said, his voice quieter but sharper than before. "Yes. What kind of training requires this level of composure during a stop?" Danielle answered without hesitation. "Professional training." Cole's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not specific. It is accurate." Hill shifted her weight slightly. "You ever worked private security, number law enforcement, number military?" Cole tilted his head slightly. "You answered that very quickly. Because the answer is simple." Cole studied her face as though attempting to read something beneath the calm surface. People with nothing to hide usually explain more. People with experience understand brevity. Hill exhaled faintly through her nose, not quite a laugh, but something close. "You speak like someone used to being in control. I speak like someone who values clarity." Cole's fingers brushed the edge of his holster again. "Step back from the vehicle." Danielle complied immediately, taking one slow step backward, maintaining visible hands at all times. Cole moved closer to the driver's door, peering briefly into the interior once more. His gaze lingered on the center console, on the clean floor mats, on the absence of personal clutter that might normally indicate hurried living. Everything appeared deliberate. Everything appeared intentional. His uncertainty grew. And uncertainty in his experience often justified deeper scrutiny. "You said you work logistics?" Cole said, still looking inside the vehicle. "Yes. That usually involves data." "Yes." "Computers." "Yes." "Multiple accounts." "Yes." "Multiple identities." Danielle blinked once. "No." Hill raised an eyebrow slightly. That sounded rehearsed. It sounded accurate. Cole closed the driver's door gently. Too gently. "Turn around," he said. Danielle complied without protest, slowly pivoting to face him, while keeping her hands clearly visible. Cole's eyes moved deliberately, scanning her posture again, as if searching for the smallest indication of concealed threat. "You carrying any identification beyond what you provided?" "Where in my wallet?" Any government credentials numbered. Hill crossed her arms lightly. "You hesitated." I paused to ensure accuracy. Cole took one slow step closer. You understand that incomplete answers complicate situations. I understand that assumptions do the same. Hill's radio crackled again, with background dispatch chatter unrelated to the stop. The sound seemed unusually loud in the otherwise quiet roadside environment. Cole's eyes narrowed slightly. You ever been involved in any investigations? He asked. No. You ever testified in court? Yes. Cole's posture shifted immediately. What kind of testimony, professional? Hill leaned slightly forward. For which agency I am not authorized to discuss case details. Cole's thumb pressed lightly against the holster strap. You keep saying that. Because it remains true. Hill glanced briefly down the road behind them. A dark pickup truck remained parked several car lengths back. Engine idling. Driver unseen. But the vehicle had not left. That fact alone introduced a new variable into Hill's mental calculations. Cole noticed her glance. You expecting someone? He asked Danielle. No. You know the driver behind us? No. Hill stepped slightly closer to Cole. Vehicle's been sitting there a while, she said quietly. Cole nodded once, then returned his attention to Danielle. You ever worked federal contracts? Danielle paused. Yes. Cole's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. What capacity advisory? Advisory for what operational efficiency? Hill gave a small exhale. That phrase again. It is an accurate description. Cole's eyes moved again across Danielle's blazer, the subtle precision of the tailoring, the understated quality of the materials. Not flashy, but not inexpensive. You understand why this might appear unusual, he said. I understand perception varies. Cole stepped slightly closer. Let's try this another way. Danielle remained silent. What exactly do you optimize? He asked. Systems. What kind of systems? Time-sensitive systems. Cole held her gaze. Meaning delays can create risk. Hill's radio crackled once more. A partial transmission. Unclear. She pressed the device closer to her shoulder. Cole's focus did not shift. You trained to remain calm under pressure, he asked Danielle. Yes. How calm? Calm enough to avoid escalation. Cole's hand settled more firmly on his holster now. A deliberate shift. Danielle noticed, but did not react. Do you believe this situation is escalating? He asked. I believe perception shapes outcomes. Cole's voice hardened slightly. That wasn't the question. It was the relevant answer. Hill stepped slightly forward. You carrying anything sharp? No. Anything that could be used as a weapon? Not many tools, num. Cole inhaled slowly through his nose. You seem very certain of your answers. I am. Hill's radio crackled again. Clearer this time. Her expression shifted. Subtle, but noticeable. Cole saw it immediately. What is it? He asked quietly. Hill hesitated, still confirming information. Cole's thumb pressed against the retention strap of his holster. A small movement, but no longer ambiguous. Behind them, the pickup truck door opened quietly. Footsteps touched pavement. Measured, steady, unhurried. Danielle heard the sound but did not turn. Cole's attention remained fixed on her, but Hill's eyes shifted slightly past his shoulder, tracking the approaching figure. Something about the posture, the pace, the lack of urgency, signaled confidence, not interference, not panic. Something else. Cole's hand remained poised on the holster, the invisible line between caution and escalation growing thinner by the second. Danielle's breathing remained steady. Even now, especially now. Because composure, she understood, often revealed more than force ever could. And somewhere just behind the officers, a voice was about to enter the situation that would change everything. The air along the roadside seemed to thicken, as though every sound had been absorbed into a pressure that no one present could fully name. Danielle Brooks stood with her hands still visible, shoulders relaxed, but aligned her breathing steady in quiet defiance of the tension gathering around her. Officer Travis Cole watched every micro-movement, every shift of weight, every blink, He had asked dozens of questions, yet the answers had only deepened his unease rather than resolved it. Danielle's composure did not match his expectation of someone pulled over during a minor traffic stop. There was no nervous chatter, no defensive frustration, no attempt to over-explain, just clarity and calm. In Cole's experience, calm often meant preparation. "What exactly do you mean by time-sensitive systems?" Cole asked again, his voice firmer now. Danielle responded evenly. "Systems where mistakes cost lives." Hill's eyes flicked toward Danielle quickly, then back to Cole. "That sounds dramatic," Hill said. "It is accurate." Cole shifted slightly, repositioning his stance as though preparing for something not yet visible. "You said you testified before," he said. "Yes. In what type of proceeding I am not authorized to disclose details." "You keep saying that," Cole replied, the edge in his voice now unmistakable. "Because it remains the truth." Hill adjusted her radio volume slightly, listening to faint background chatter that still did not clearly relate to the stop. Cole took one slow step closer. "Do you believe you're above answering questions? No. Then answer them." "I have answered all relevant questions." Cole's jaw tightened. "That's not for you to determine." Danielle did not respond. Silence again. The kind of silence that magnified intention. Cole's gaze drifted toward her hands, then to the subtle movement of her fingers as she flexed them once against the metal surface of the hood. A small movement. Normal. But in heightened environments, even normal movement could be misinterpreted. "What was that?" Cole said sharply. "I adjusted my balance. Keep your hands still. They remain visible." I said still. Danielle's hands returned to complete stillness. Hill shifted slightly to Danielle's right side, narrowing the space between them. "You mentioned federal contracts," Hill said. "Yes. You ever carry credentials related to those contracts?" "No. You sure about that?" "Yes." Cole's fingers tightened slightly against the holster strap. "You ever held security clearance?" "Yes." "What level? I am not authorized to disclose that." Cole's patience thinned visibly. "You see how that sounds? I see how assumptions form." Hill's radio crackled again, louder this time. "Verification in progress." The partial transmission faded into static. Cole's eyes narrowed. Verification for what he asked Hill. Still waiting for confirmation. Cole turned back to Danielle. "Step away from the vehicle." Danielle complied immediately, stepping backward slowly, hands remaining visible at chest level. Cole moved forward, scanning the interior once more, as though proximity might reveal something distance had concealed. His gaze stopped briefly on a slim folder resting neatly in the passenger footwell. Plain, unmarked, organized. He glanced back at Danielle. "You mind explaining what's inside that folder? Work materials." "What kind of materials?" "Logistics planning." Cole's voice sharpened. "What kind of logistics requires this level of confidentiality?" "The kind that prevents disruption." Hill crossed her arms lightly. "You keep giving answers that sound important without saying anything specific. I am saying what I am permitted to say." Cole closed the driver's door again, this time more firmly. He stepped back toward Danielle, the distance between them shortening. "You ever been trained in tactical environments?" he asked. "Yes." Cole froze for half a second. "What kind of tactical environments? Controlled environments?" Hill exhaled slowly. "That's not an answer. It is the only answer I am authorized to give." Cole's thumb pressed against the retention strap of his holster again. "You understand how this appears. I understand perception is influenced by expectation." Cole's voice dropped lower. "Turn around." Danielle complied. Slowly. Carefully. Predictably. Her hands remained visible as she rotated her posture unchanged. Cole stepped closer behind her. "Do not move. I am not moving." A faint breeze passed through the roadside trees, lifting a few strands of Danielle's hair before settling again. Cole's breathing had changed now. Slightly faster. Not panic, but anticipation. Hill's radio crackled once more, possible match pending. Hill's eyes shifted toward Cole. Still not confirmed, she said quietly. Cole's gaze hardened. "Spread your fingers." Danielle complied immediately. Cole watched the movement carefully. Every muscle in his arm appeared ready for what even he did not fully know. Danielle adjusted her footing slightly to maintain balance against the uneven gravel shoulder. A small shift. Necessary. Normal. But Cole's reaction was immediate. "Stop moving." I adjusted my stance. I said, "Do not move." My hands remain visible. Cole's voice sharpened. "Do not move again." Danielle became completely still. Even her breathing slowed further. Hill's radio crackled again. "Federal database delay." Cole's thumb slipped beneath the retention strap. Unfastened. A subtle click. Barely audible, but unmistakable. Danielle heard it. Did not react. Cole's hand rested on the grip of his firearm now. The boundary between caution and escalation dissolving. "You ever carry a weapon professionally?" Cole asked. "No." "You ever trained with one?" "Yes." Hill's eyes widened slightly. "What kind of training?" she asked. "Situational training." Cole's grip tightened. "You understand why that matters. I understand context matters." Danielle shifted her weight a fraction of an inch to relieve pressure on her left foot. Cole's reaction was instantaneous. "Do not move. I am maintaining balance." His voice rose slightly. I said, "Do not move." Danielle became completely still again. Hill's radio crackled sharply. "Stand by." Cole's breathing quickened. "You need to remain exactly where you are," he said. "I am." The tension had now reached a threshold where interpretation could override reason. Cole's hand tightened around the grip of his weapon. His voice sharpened. "Keep your hands where I can see them. They are visible. Higher." Danielle raised her hands slowly to shoulder level. Carefully. Deliberately. Cole's firearm cleared the holster in one controlled motion. Not fully raised, but unmistakably drawn. Hill inhaled sharply. Passing traffic slowed further now, drivers sensing escalation even without understanding details. The air seemed to freeze. Time stretched. Danielle did not flinch, did not speak, did not move. Her voice, when she finally spoke, remained calm. "Officer, I am complying." Cole's grip tightened, then remained still. Behind them, footsteps continued approaching with measured precision. Unhurried, unafraid. And within seconds, a new voice would enter the moment. One that carried authority of a different kind. The moment the weapon cleared the holster, the atmosphere changed in a way that could not be reversed. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Danielle Brooks stood perfectly still, her hands raised slowly to shoulder height, exactly as instructed, fingers spread, movements deliberate and controlled. There was no panic in her eyes, no sudden reaction, no protest, only composure. Officer Travis Cole's firearm remained angled forward, not fully extended, but no longer concealed. His breathing had shortened into controlled intervals, each inhale slightly sharper than the last. Officer Megan Hill stood to the side, her posture tense, radio still clipped near her shoulder as fragments of dispatch communication continued to break through. Static, passing traffic slowed further, drivers instinctively sensing the gravity of the moment, even without understanding the cause. Inside the dark pickup truck behind the patrol car, the engine finally powered down. The driver's door opened. The sound was quiet, almost lost beneath the distant hum of passing vehicles, yet the timing was unmistakable. Measured footsteps approached across the pavement. Unhurried. Even. Deliberate. The man who stepped forward did not rush toward the officers. He did not raise his voice. He did not make sudden gestures. Everything about his movement communicated control, not the tense control of anxiety, but the grounded stillness of someone accustomed to operating inside volatile environments. Marcus Hale was 42 years old, though the discipline in his posture made age almost irrelevant. His shoulders remained relaxed, yet aligned the subtle balance of someone trained to remain aware of every angle without appearing defensive. He wore a dark navy jacket over a plain gray shirt, dark jeans, and worn leather boots that suggested function over fashion. Nothing about his clothing drew attention. Nothing about him appeared dramatic. Yet the quiet precision of his presence altered the geometry of the scene. Marcus slowed several feet behind the officers, maintaining a respectful distance while allowing his voice to carry clearly. "Officers," he said calmly. Cole's attention flickered briefly toward the voice, but did not fully shift away from Danielle. "Sir, step back," Cole said without lowering the weapon. Marcus complied immediately, raising one hand slightly, not in surrender, but in acknowledgement of authority. "Understood," Marcus replied evenly. Hill turned her head slightly, assessing the newcomer quickly. "Remain by your vehicle," she instructed. Marcus nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." The formality in his tone was unmistakable. Respectful. Precise. Intentional. Danielle remained still, though the slightest shift in her breathing suggested recognition. Marcus's gaze moved briefly toward Danielle, not long enough to appear communicative, not short enough to appear unfamiliar. Then he spoke again. "Officer, the individual you are addressing is complying fully." Cole's grip tightened slightly. "Sir, this does not concern you." Marcus's voice remained level. "With respect, situations involving elevated force often concern anyone within the immediate area." Cole's eyes narrowed slightly. "I am instructing you to step back. I have already stepped back." Hill studied Marcus more closely now, her attention shifting between his posture and the subtle confidence in his tone. "Do you know this individual?" Hill asked. Marcus paused. "Yes." Danielle remained motionless. Cole's voice sharpened. In what capacity? Marcus chose his words carefully. "Professional." Cole's stance stiffened further. "Step farther back," he repeated. Marcus complied again, increasing the distance between himself and the officers by several measured steps. His hands remained visible, relaxed, open, non-threatening. Every movement intentional. Cole's firearm remained drawn, though his focus had now split between Danielle and Marcus. "Keep your hands raised," Cole instructed Danielle. "They remain raised," she replied calmly. Marcus's gaze remained steady, assessing the scene with quiet precision. Hill shifted her stance slightly. "What is your name, sir?" she asked. "Marcus Hale. You have identification?" "Yes." "Do not reach for it yet," Cole instructed sharply. Marcus nodded once. "Understood." Hill's radio crackled again, but her attention remained on Marcus now. "You said you know her professionally," Hill said. "Yes." "How long?" "Several years." Cole exhaled slowly. "You were following this vehicle?" "No." "Then why stop?" Marcus answered without hesitation. "Because I observed a firearm drawn during what appeared to be a compliant interaction." Cole's jaw tightened. "This is a lawful stop. I have not suggested otherwise." Hill crossed her arms lightly. "You understand interfering with a police stop can create complications." "I am not interfering." Marcus's tone remained calm. Neutral. Precise. Cole glanced briefly toward Hill, then back to Danielle. "Keep your hands higher," he instructed. Danielle raised her hands slightly higher, maintaining slow, controlled movement. Marcus observed carefully. Every detail, every shift in posture, every tone change. Hill stepped slightly closer to Marcus, though still maintaining a safe distance. "What do you do for a living, Mr. Hale?" she asked. Marcus met her gaze evenly. "I work in risk assessment." Cole gave a small exhale. "That sounds convenient." "It is accurate." Hill studied him closely. "What kind of risk assessment?" "The kind that evaluates outcomes under pressure." Cole's firearm remained steady, though the tension in his shoulders had begun to change. Not reduced, redirected. Marcus's posture communicated neither submission nor challenge, only awareness. He spoke again carefully. "Officer, I would encourage continued, clear communication." Cole's eyes narrowed. "I do not require instruction." Marcus inclined his head slightly. "Of course." Hill's radio crackled once more. "Database delay continuing." Cole exhaled sharply through his nose. Marcus allowed a brief pause before speaking again. "Danielle," he said calmly. Cole's head snapped slightly toward him. "Do not address her directly," Cole instructed. Marcus corrected immediately. "Yes, sir." Another pause. Then Marcus spoke again, this time with deliberate clarity. "Ma'am, continue complying." The word landed differently. Not casual. Not familiar. Formal. Respectful. Intentional. Hill noticed. Cole noticed. Danielle did not move. Did not react. Yet the smallest shift in the atmosphere suggested that something important had just been revealed, though neither officer yet understood what. Cole's voice sharpened. "How exactly do you know her?" Marcus answered carefully. "She has provided operational guidance in high-risk environments." Hill's eyes flickered briefly toward Cole. Cole's grip remained firm. "What kind of environments?" Marcus paused. "Environments where composure prevents escalation." Cole's jaw flexed. "You need to be very clear right now." Marcus nodded once. "I am being clear." Hill's radio crackled again. "Possible federal flag?" Hill's eyes widened slightly. Cole noticed. "What flag?" he asked quietly. Hill hesitated. Still verifying. Marcus remained still. Patient. Unhurried. Then he spoke the sentence that shifted everything further. Officer Marcus said calmly, "You may want to reconsider the angle of that weapon." Cole's voice hardened. "Why?" Marcus met his gaze without challenge. "Because the individual you are addressing has operated in environments where escalation decisions carry permanent consequences." Cole's expression tightened. you implying something. Marcus's voice remained level. No, sir. A brief pause. Then carefully, I am simply suggesting awareness. Cole's grip on the firearm did not loosen, but something in his certainty had begun to fracture. Behind the tension, a question had formed, and questions once formed rarely disappeared. The silence that followed Marcus Hale's last sentence did not feel empty. It felt charged, as though the atmosphere itself were waiting for the next decision to define the direction of everything that followed. Officer Travis Cole did not lower his weapon. But he did not raise it further either. His grip remained firm, his stance still tactical, yet something subtle had entered the calculation behind his eyes, hesitation not born from uncertainty of procedure, but from the possibility that the situation contained information he did not yet possess. Officer Megan Hill glanced briefly toward her radio again, as though hoping the device would confirm something concrete enough to restore clarity. Instead, the static continued to offer only fragments, verification pending. Federal system delay. Stand by. Danielle Brooks remained perfectly still, hands raised, posture aligned, her breathing steady despite the firearm directed in her direction. Marcus maintained his distance, careful not to move. Suddenly, careful not to disrupt the fragile balance that now existed between escalation and resolution. Cole's voice broke the silence. You stated this individual provided operational guidance, he said, eyes still fixed on Danielle. Be specific, Marcus answered evenly. I am limited in what I can disclose in an open environment. That's not acceptable, Cole replied sharply. It is necessary. Hill shifted her stance slightly, watching Marcus more closely now, evaluating the precision of his language, the discipline in his posture. You said you work in risk assessment, Hill said. Yes. For which organization? Marcus paused briefly. Contracted analysis. That's vague, Hill replied. It is intentional. Cole's jaw flexed. Everyone suddenly has confidentiality today. Marcus did not react to the comment. Instead, he spoke calmly. Officer, the individual you are addressing has demonstrated full compliance at every stage of this interaction. That is not your determination to make, Cole said. It is an observable fact. Cole's weapon remained steady. You still haven't explained your involvement. Marcus inclined his head slightly. I observed escalation during a compliant stop and decided to intervene. I decided to ensure communication remained clear. Hill folded her arms loosely, still watching Marcus carefully. You speak like someone accustomed to command environments. Marcus did not respond immediately. Instead, he reached slowly toward the inside pocket of his jacket. Cole's voice sharpened instantly. Do not reach. Marcus stopped immediately. My identification, he said calmly. Cole's eyes remained locked on the movement that had not yet occurred. Slowly, Marcus nodded once. Understood. With deliberate care, he withdrew a slim, dark credential wallet, holding it between two fingers, keeping the motion visible and predictable at all times. He extended the credential outward without stepping closer. Hill moved forward cautiously, retrieving the identification without allowing their hands to touch. She opened the wallet. Her eyes scanned the contents once, then again. Her posture shifted. Not dramatically, but unmistakably. Cole noticed immediately. What is it, he asked. Hill hesitated, then spoke quietly. This credential is federal. Cole's grip tightened slightly. For what agency? Hill's eyes remained on the identification. Department of Defense contractor clearance. Cole exhaled slowly through his nose. Contractor doesn't mean authority. No, Hill agreed. But the designation is high level. Cole's eyes shifted briefly toward Marcus. Why didn't you state that immediately? Marcus answered calmly. Because identification is typically requested before disclosed. Cole's jaw tightened. You believe you understand procedure. I believe in respecting procedure. Hill continued examining the credential. There's also a military designation reference, she added. Cole's eyes narrowed. What designation? Hill looked up. Navy Special Warfare Affiliation. The phrase seemed to alter the atmosphere in a way that even passing drivers might have felt, without understanding why. Cole's posture shifted subtly. You're claiming Special Warfare Affiliation, he asked. Marcus corrected calmly. I am stating prior service. Cole's gaze sharpened. Rank Marcus did not answer directly. Retired operational status. Hill looked at the credential again. This clearance level requires extensive background verification, she said quietly. Cole's attention shifted briefly back toward Danielle. You're connected to him professionally? Cole asked. Danielle answered evenly. Yes. Cole's voice hardened. In what capacity? Danielle spoke carefully. Operational consultation. Hill's eyes flicked quickly between them. Cole lowered the weapon slightly, not fully, but enough to signal that calculation had entered his process. What type of operations? He asked. Danielle paused. Logistical coordination. For military units? Cole asked. For multi-agency environments. Cole studied her face carefully. You expect me to accept that explanation without detail. I expect professional discretion to be understood. Hill closed the credential wallet slowly. This documentation is legitimate, she said quietly. Cole exhaled again. The tension in his shoulders had changed now. Still alert, still cautious, but no longer certain. Marcus spoke again carefully. Officer, I am not here to challenge authority. Cole did not respond. I am here to ensure a situation remains proportional. Cole's jaw flexed again. You're suggesting disproportional force. I am suggesting awareness. Hill handed the credential back to Marcus. Do you carry identification confirming her status? Cole asked suddenly. Marcus did not hesitate. I do not carry her credentials. Cole's eyes returned to Danielle. You claim federal contract involvement? Yes. Do you possess documentation? Yes. Where in my vehicle? Cole hesitated. Hill spoke quietly. If documentation exists, we should verify. Cole nodded once, but the firearm remained partially raised. Slowly retrieve the document, he instructed. Danielle spoke calmly. My folder is in the passenger footwell. Cole watched every movement as Danielle slowly lowered one hand, maintaining the other raised. Her movements remained deliberate, predictable, controlled. She opened the passenger door carefully, reached slowly toward the slim folder, retrieved it, turned, extended it forward. Hill accepted the folder cautiously, opened it. Her eyes scanned the contents. Her breathing changed slightly. Cole noticed immediately. Well, he asked. Hill's voice lowered. These documents reference Department of Defense coordination contracts. Cole's posture shifted again. This does not automatically justify, Hill interrupted quietly. Her name appears in federal coordination briefings. Cole's grip loosened slightly. Not fully, but enough. Marcus remained silent, observing, waiting. Danielle's hands remained visible. Calm, unwavering. Cole exhaled slowly. You understand why this situation required clarification, he said. Danielle answered evenly. I understand why assumptions required verification. Hill closed the folder carefully. Cole finally lowered the firearm completely. But the shift in authority had already begun. And none of them yet understood how far the consequences of this moment would extend. The moment Officer Travis Cole fully lowered his weapon, the energy of the roadside shifted not instantly into calm, but into something far more complicated. Accountability, uncertainty, awareness. The tension did not disappear. It transformed. Danielle Brooks slowly lowered her hands, only after Cole gave a small nod indicating she could relax her position. Even then, her movements remained measured, controlled, as though discipline had become instinct rather than choice. Officer Megan Hill continued reviewing the documents Danielle had provided, flipping each page carefully. Her eyes scanning lines of text, dense with technical terminology, contract identifiers, and redacted sections that hinted at information not intended for public visibility. "These are coordination briefings," Hill said quietly, almost to herself. Cole's jaw remained tight. Coordination for what exactly, he asked. Hill did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked again at a header printed near the top of one page. Multi-Agency Logistics Stabilization Initiative. Federal Response Optimization Framework. Emergency Deployment Timing Protocols. Her eyes lifted slowly toward Danielle. "You're involved in federal contingency planning?" Hill asked. Danielle answered evenly. "I provide analytical modeling support." Cole crossed his arms now, though the rigid defensive posture from earlier had softened slightly into guarded attention. "What kind of contingencies require this level of classification?" he asked. Danielle paused, selecting her words carefully. "The kind that involve large-scale coordination between agencies with different operational timelines." Cole's expression remained skeptical, though the confidence behind that skepticism had begun to erode. "You're telling me your work affects federal response readiness?" he asked. "I am telling you my work involves reducing risk created by delayed decision-making." Marcus Hale remained silent several feet away, his posture unchanged, though the subtle relaxation in his shoulders suggested the most volatile moment had passed. Hill turned another page in the folder. Embedded reference numbers. Cross-agency distribution lists. Briefing schedules aligned to time zones across multiple continents. Her voice lowered further. "These timestamps correspond to joint operational planning exercises," she said. Cole's eyes flicked briefly toward Marcus. "You were aware of this?" he asked. Marcus answered simply. "Yes." Cole exhaled slowly. "And you didn't think to clarify that immediately?" Marcus responded calmly. "I believed the situation would resolve through standard verification procedures." Cole's jaw flexed again. Hill's finger paused on a section referencing simulation review participation. "Danielle Brooks, Senior Analytical Consultant, Strategic Timing Advisor, Risk Compression Specialist." Hill looked up again. "These are not entry-level designations," she said quietly. Danielle did not respond. Cole shifted his weight. "You previously testified," he said, recalling her earlier statement. "Yes. In what context? Operational review?" Cole tilted his head slightly. "You testified regarding logistics systems, yes. For which agency I am not authorized to disclose specific agency names." Hill spoke carefully. "These cross-references indicate Department of Defense Coordination Review panels." Cole's attention sharpened. "You were advising military operations," he asked. "I was advising timing frameworks. That's a distinction without a difference. It is a distinction with significant difference." Marcus spoke for the first time since the firearm had been lowered. "Timing determines outcome," he said calmly. Cole glanced toward him. In what way Marcus chose his words with precision. "In environments where minutes determine survivability, logistics becomes strategy." Cole studied Danielle again. "You're saying your work influences tactical deployment timing. I am saying my work influences whether resources arrive when needed." Hill closed the folder. Halfway, her expression more thoughtful now than suspicious. "These references indicate involvement in overseas operational simulations," she said. Danielle answered evenly. "Simulation environments allow testing of coordination models without unnecessary risk." Cole folded his arms tighter. "You've been deployed overseas now. You worked with personnel who have... Yes. Cole's gaze shifted again toward Marcus. You worked together? Marcus nodded once. Yes. Cole's expression hardened slightly again. What environment? Marcus paused. Joint advisory exercise. Cole exhaled slowly through his nose. You keep your answers narrow. I keep them accurate. Hill flipped to the final page of the folder. Signature authorization blocks. Review clearance stamps. Multi-level verification codes. Her voice lowered again. These are federal-level coordination authorizations. Cole's eyes narrowed slightly. You're telling me the individual I stopped for a license plate obstruction participates in federal response modeling? Danielle met his gaze evenly. I am telling you I perform my assigned responsibilities. Cole's voice remained guarded. You understand how that appears. I understand how assumptions form quickly. Marcus spoke again carefully. Officer individuals working in high-level coordination environments often maintain low public profiles. Cole gave a small exhale. That sounds convenient. It sounds consistent with operational discretion, Marcus replied calmly. Hill handed the folder back to Danielle. These documents appear legitimate, she said. Cole's posture remained guarded. You mentioned simulations, he said. Yes. What kind of scenarios require this modeling natural disaster response? Military response, joint response frameworks. Cole's eyes narrowed slightly. You speak like someone trained to avoid disclosure. I speak like someone trained to maintain accuracy. Hill crossed her arms loosely. These timestamps align with crisis readiness exercises conducted over the last 3 years, she said. Cole's skepticism shifted again, though not fully dissolving. You've been doing this long? Several years. Cole exhaled slowly. And you didn't think to mention that immediately. You did not ask relevant questions initially. Cole gave a small, humorless breath. That sounds like criticism. It is observation. Marcus's voice remained calm. Professional environments often require structured communication. Cole glanced toward him again. You speak like someone accustomed to operational briefings. Marcus did not respond immediately. Instead, he allowed the silence to carry meaning. Hill adjusted her radio again, listening to updated dispatch chatter. Possible federal coordination identifier confirmed. Her eyes shifted briefly toward Cole. He noticed immediately. What identifier? He asked. Hill spoke quietly. Database cross-reference confirms clearance category associated with Federal Operational Advisory. Cole's arms loosened slightly. You're saying her credentials appear valid. I'm saying they match federal records. Cole's attention returned to Danielle. You understand this situation required verification. Danielle answered calmly. I understand verification is standard procedure. Cole hesitated, then spoke more carefully. Your level of composure suggested prior exposure to high-pressure environments. That is accurate. Marcus finally stepped one pace closer, still maintaining respectful distance. Officer, he said calmly, some individuals are trained to remain calm, specifically to prevent escalation. Cole studied both of them carefully now. The assumptions that had shaped the first 15 minutes of the stop had begun to fracture under the weight of new information. Yet uncertainty remained, because credentials explained presence, but not identity. And one question still lingered in the air. Exactly who was Danielle Brooks? The quiet stretch of roadside had transformed into something far heavier than a routine traffic stop. Even though the firearm was no longer drawn, the residue of escalation lingered in the air like static after lightning. Officer Travis Cole shifted his stance, no longer positioned as aggressively as before, yet still visibly guarded. The authority he carried had not disappeared, but the certainty behind it had begun to fracture. Officer Megan Hill adjusted the volume on her shoulder radio, the low crackle of dispatch now more persistent, more focused. Confirmation request escalated. Federal liaison notified. Stand by for supervisory contact. Cole's eyes flicked briefly toward the radio. Escalated, he repeated quietly. Hill nodded once, her voice low. The database flag triggered secondary review. Cole's jaw tightened again, though the reaction no longer carried the confidence it had earlier. Danielle Brooks stood calmly beside the hood of her sedan, her hands now lowered but still visible, posture relaxed yet attentive. Her composure remained unchanged, as though the drawn firearm minutes earlier had not altered her internal equilibrium. Marcus Hale remained several feet away, hands visible, body angled slightly away from the officers to signal non-threat posture, a subtle but unmistakable gesture common among individuals trained to avoid triggering defensive reactions. Passing traffic had slowed noticeably now. Several vehicles moved at reduced speed, drivers sensing tension without understanding details. A few phones were visible through windshields, recording discreetly as they passed. Cole noticed. Every officer noticed. Public visibility changed everything. Hill's radio crackled again. Supervisor requesting clarification. Cole exhaled slowly. Dispatch is contacting command, he asked. Hill nodded. That's what it sounds like. Cole glanced toward Danielle again. You understand, once a federal flag appears, additional verification becomes necessary. Danielle answered evenly. I understand procedural escalation. Cole crossed his arms. You could have disclosed the nature of your work earlier. You did not initially ask relevant questions. Cole gave a small breath through his nose. That's not how this usually goes. Situations vary. Hill's radio crackled sharply again. Captain Reynolds requesting immediate update. Cole's eyes shifted instantly. Captain involvement indicated the stop had reached a level of attention no officer welcomed unnecessarily. Hill pressed the radio button. Unit 14 responding. A brief pause. Then a voice through static. Confirm identity of individual flagged in Federal Coordination Database. Hill glanced toward Danielle. Name matches Danielle Brooks, she said into the radio. Static. Then remain on scene. Cole's jaw tightened. That was quick, he muttered. Hill kept her voice low. Federal flags don't usually take long. Cole shifted his weight again, scanning the surroundings, instinctively aware now that the situation had expanded beyond local jurisdiction perception. Marcus remained silent, though the slight narrowing of his eyes suggested he recognized the shift as well. Danielle remained composed. Not surprised, not defensive, simply patient. Cole looked back at her. You mentioned federal coordination exercises, he said. Yes. Cole tilted his head slightly. You involved in emergency response planning. I contribute analytical modeling. Cole's voice lowered. Do you understand how unusual it is for that level of involvement to intersect with a roadside stop? I understand that misunderstandings occur. Hill's radio crackled again. Federal liaison requesting confirmation of officer badge numbers. Cole exhaled slowly. That's new. Hill glanced at him. They're verifying everyone now. Cole adjusted his vest unconsciously. Badge number 7421, he said quietly. Hill relayed the number. Static. Pause. Then remain on scene. Do not escalate further. Cole gave a small, humorless breath. That instruction feels redundant. Marcus spoke carefully. Clarity often prevents unnecessary outcomes. Cole did not respond, but he did not challenge the comment either. Hill's radio continued to transmit low-level chatter, now phrases referencing verification pathways, liaison contacts, and coordination channels. Danielle remained silent, allowing the process to unfold without interruption. Cole finally spoke again. "You testified previously," he said. "Yes." "In advisory capacity?" "Yes." "For operational review?" "Yes." Cole's voice remained measured. "Your work affects federal readiness timelines. It affects efficiency within those timelines." Cole looked briefly toward Marcus. "You confirmed prior service?" Marcus nodded once. "Yes." "Navy Special Warfare?" "Yes." Cole gave a slow exhale. "Then you understand why officers respond cautiously," Marcus answered calmly. "I understand why proportionality matters." Hill's radio crackled again. "Federal liaison en route." Cole's eyes narrowed. "En route," Hill nodded. "That's what they said." Cole scanned the road instinctively. How far out Hill listened again. "Estimated arrival 8 minutes." Cole exhaled slowly. "This is becoming unnecessarily complicated." Danielle spoke calmly. "Complexity often reveals clarity." Cole gave a small shake of his head. "That sounds philosophical. It is practical." Passing traffic continued to slow, some vehicles nearly stopping before moving forward again. The presence of multiple parked vehicles now created an unmistakable visual signal that something unusual was occurring. Cole adjusted his stance, again posture, now less confrontational, though still cautious. "You understand why this stop cannot simply end immediately," he said. "I understand procedure." Hill crossed her arms lightly, watching Danielle with new curiosity rather than suspicion. "You maintain composure unusually well," Hill said. Danielle answered simply. "Training emphasizes stability." Cole gave a small exhale. Training for what exactly? Danielle met his gaze. "Decision environments where panic creates error." Marcus spoke again carefully. "In high-pressure systems, emotional regulation is often more valuable than speed." Cole glanced toward him. "You speak like someone who has seen those environments firsthand." Marcus did not deny it. "I have." Hill's radio crackled again. "Liaison vehicle approaching location." Cole scanned the road behind them. A black government sedan had just turned onto the shoulder several hundred yards away. Unmarked, but unmistakable in posture. The kind of vehicle that did not arrive accidentally. Cole exhaled slowly. "Well," he said quietly, "it appears clarification is arriving." Danielle remained still, unmoved, composed. Marcus remained silent, observing, waiting, because sometimes the arrival of answers created more questions than resolution. And the next few minutes would determine not only how this encounter ended, but how it would be remembered. The black sedan approached without urgency, yet its presence carried a gravity that was impossible to ignore. It did not use emergency lights. It did not use sirens. It did not need to. Authority often arrived quietly. Officer Travis Cole straightened unconsciously, adjusting the front of his vest, as the vehicle slowed and pulled onto the shoulder several yards behind the patrol car. The driver's door opened smoothly, and a man in a dark suit stepped out with measured calm, closing the door gently behind him. His movements conveyed familiarity with environments where attention to detail was non-negotiable. Officer Megan Hill's radio crackled once more. "Federal liaison confirmed on scene." Cole exhaled slowly through his nose. "Well," he muttered quietly, "that answers one question." The suited man approached without haste, his posture composed eyes scanning the environment with professional efficiency. He did not rush toward Danielle. He did not address Marcus immediately. Instead, he first acknowledged the officers. Officers, he said, calmly producing a slim credential wallet in a motion so fluid it seemed rehearsed through years of repetition. Hill accepted the identification, her eyes scanning the credentials carefully. Her posture changed almost instantly. "Special Agent Daniel Ruiz," she read quietly. Cole's eyes flicked toward the badge. "Department of Defense Liaison Division." Ruiz inclined his head slightly. "Thank you for your cooperation," he said. His voice was neutral, calm, professional, the tone of someone accustomed to entering situations already in progress. Cole folded his arms loosely, attempting to maintain composure despite the clear shift in hierarchy unfolding in front of him. "Agent Ruiz Cole said we initiated a traffic stop due to a partially obstructed license plate." Ruiz nodded once. "I understand." Hill handed the credential back. "We conducted standard verification procedures," she added. Ruiz's gaze moved briefly toward Danielle, not with curiosity, with recognition. "Ms. Brooks," he said calmly. Danielle inclined her head slightly. "Agent Ruiz." Cole noticed the exchange immediately. "You are familiar with each other," he observed. Ruiz answered evenly. "We have participated in coordination briefings." Cole exhaled slowly. "Coordination for what exactly?" he asked. Ruiz paused briefly before responding. "Operational continuity assessments." Cole's jaw flexed faintly. "That's a broad description. It is an appropriate description." Hill remained silent now, allowing Ruiz to guide the interaction. Ruiz shifted his attention back toward Cole. "My understanding is that Ms. Brooks has complied fully with your requests." Cole nodded once. She declined consent for a search. Ruiz acknowledged the statement calmly. "That is her legal right." Cole hesitated. "We requested clarification regarding her professional identification." Ruiz nodded again, and she provided documentation. Cole gave a small exhale. "Yes." Ruiz's posture remained neutral. "Then the verification process appears complete." Cole's eyes narrowed slightly. "You are suggesting the stop is resolved," Ruiz chose his words carefully. "I am suggesting the situation has been clarified." Hill crossed her arms lightly. "Her credentials triggered a federal database flag," she said. Ruiz acknowledged the statement. "That system exists to ensure proper coordination when individuals involved in sensitive operational frameworks encounter procedural review." Cole shifted his weight. "That sounds like an unusual scenario for a traffic stop." Ruiz's expression did not change. "Unusual scenarios occur." Marcus Hale remained several feet away, observing quietly, allowing the exchange to unfold without interruption. Cole's voice lowered slightly. Her level of composure suggested prior exposure to high-risk environments. Ruiz nodded once. "Composure is often a professional requirement." Hill glanced briefly toward Danielle again. "You advised multi-agency response simulations," she said. Danielle answered calmly. "I contribute analytical modeling." Cole folded his arms more tightly. "You understand why we needed to confirm identity." Ruiz's tone remained even. "Verification is standard practice." Cole hesitated, then spoke more carefully. The weapon was drawn due to perceived uncertainty. Ruiz acknowledged the statement without visible reaction. "Perception influences decision-making." Cole exhaled slowly. "You're saying we misinterpreted behavior." Ruiz chose his words with precision. "I am saying situational context evolves." Hill's radio crackled faintly again, though no new instructions followed. Ruiz glanced briefly toward Marcus. "And Mr. Hale," he said. Marcus inclined his head slightly. "Agent Ruiz." Cole's eyes shifted between them. "You two know each other as well," Ruiz answered simply. "Yes." Cole's skepticism flickered again. "This is a very interconnected roadside stop." Ruiz allowed the faintest hint of acknowledgement. Operational environments often create overlapping professional relationships. Hill studied Ruiz's expression carefully. "You are confirming Ms. Brooks is cleared for involvement in federal coordination frameworks," Ruiz answered directly. "Yes." Cole exhaled slowly through his nose. "And the documentation she provided is legitimate." "Yes." Cole shifted his stance again, the tension in his posture now noticeably reduced. "You understand our responsibility to verify." Ruiz nodded once. "Verification ensures accountability." Cole gave a small nod, though the gesture carried a subtle weight of recognition. Hill spoke quietly. "No contraband was found." Ruiz acknowledged the statement. "I would not expect otherwise." Cole glanced briefly toward Danielle. "You could have stated the nature of your work earlier," Danielle answered calmly. "You did not initially ask questions relevant to my profession." Ruiz allowed the silence to settle, because silence often revealed what language attempted to avoid. Cole finally spoke again. "You are free to leave," he said. Danielle nodded slightly. "Thank you." Hill stepped back from the vehicle, allowing space for the encounter to conclude. Ruiz remained composed. "Officers," he said calmly, "thank you for your cooperation." Cole nodded once, though the gesture carried an undercurrent of reflection. Hill gave a brief, professional nod. Marcus remained still, observing without comment. Danielle opened her car door slowly, placing the folder back inside with the same measured precision she had demonstrated throughout the encounter. Ruiz stepped back, maintaining professional distance. Cole watched the movement carefully, the earlier tension now replaced by quiet reassessment. Because the situation had revealed something difficult to ignore, assumptions had guided the first half of the encounter. Facts had reshaped the second. Danielle paused briefly before entering the vehicle, her voice calm, measured, directed toward Cole. "Officer," she said, "at what point did compliance become suspicion?" Cole did not immediately respond, because the question did not require an answer spoken aloud. And sometimes the most important questions remained unanswered in the moment they were asked. Danielle Brooks's question lingered in the air long after the words had been spoken. "Officer, at what point did compliance become suspicion?" Officer Travis Cole did not respond immediately. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy with the realization that the situation had moved beyond procedural explanation into something more uncomfortable, something personal, something undeniable. Cole shifted his stance slightly, the rigid confidence that had defined his posture earlier now replaced with a careful awareness that every word carried weight beyond the roadside. Officer Megan Hill remained still beside him, her arms no longer crossed defensively, but resting neutrally at her sides, as though the tension had drained from her posture and left behind only professional attentiveness. Special Agent Daniel Ruiz watched quietly, offering no interruption, allowing the moment to unfold without interference. Marcus Hale stood several feet away, hands relaxed, expression calm but observant. Danielle's question had not been confrontational. It had been precise, and precision often revealed truths that emotion alone could not. Cole exhaled slowly through his nose. "Our responsibility is to ensure public safety," he said finally, though his voice no longer carried the same certainty as before. Danielle nodded slightly. I respect public safety. Cole hesitated. Your responses created ambiguity. My responses were accurate. Hill spoke carefully. The refusal of consent for a search raised additional questions. Danielle met her gaze evenly. Exercising a legal right should not create suspicion. Hill did not respond immediately, because the statement was difficult to dispute. Ruiz spoke calmly, his tone neutral. Legal boundaries exist to protect both citizens and officers. Cole's jaw flexed slightly. The drawn weapon was a precaution. Marcus spoke quietly. A drawn weapon changes perception permanently. Cole did not deny it, because the truth in the statement required no argument. Passing vehicles continued moving slowly along the roadway. The presence of multiple stopped cars, now a visible signal that something unusual had occurred. Cole shifted his weight again, the internal conflict evident in the subtle tension along his shoulders. We encounter unpredictable situations, he said. Danielle responded calmly. Predictability often depends on interpretation. Hill's radio crackled faintly, but neither officer moved to answer it, because the most important conversation was already happening. Cole finally spoke again. You mentioned professional training. Yes? You remained calm even when a weapon was drawn. Yes. Cole hesitated. That is not typical behavior. Danielle answered simply. Panic introduces unnecessary variables. Marcus inclined his head slightly. In high-risk environments, emotional control prevents escalation. Cole exhaled slowly. You are describing environments far removed from routine civilian interaction. Danielle did not disagree. Some environments require discipline that appears unusual elsewhere. Hill looked toward Ruiz. These credentials indicate involvement in national response coordination frameworks. Ruiz confirmed with a small nod. Yes. Cole's voice lowered. You operate in crisis simulation environments, Danielle answered carefully. Yes. What type of crisis? The type that requires cooperation between agencies with differing priorities. Cole gave a small breath. That still sounds intentionally broad. It is appropriately broad. Ruiz spoke calmly. Operational modeling often requires discretion. Cole glanced briefly toward Marcus. You worked with her in those environments. Marcus nodded once. Yes. Cole studied him carefully. In what capacity? Marcus chose his words with precision. Field perspective integration. Hill looked between them. You mean she analyzes deployment timing? Marcus answered simply. Yes. Cole exhaled slowly. So when you addressed her as ma'am earlier, Marcus did not hesitate. It was appropriate. Cole's jaw flexed faintly. Appropriate based on what Marcus met his gaze calmly. Professional respect. Silence followed again. Because respect could not be demanded, only recognized. Hill shifted her stance slightly. These records show her participation in interagency response modeling exercises tied to overseas evacuation scenarios, she said quietly. Cole's eyes flicked briefly toward Danielle again. You advise people responsible for deployment decisions. I advise systems responsible for timing efficiency. Cole gave a small breath. That distinction seems intentional. It is precise. Ruiz stepped slightly forward, maintaining neutral tone. Ms. Brooks's work supports coordination between agencies that often operate under conflicting timelines. Cole crossed his arms loosely. You're saying she helps prevent operational delays? Yes, Ruiz replied. Marcus added quietly. Delays cost lives. Cole did not respond. because the weight of that statement did not require elaboration. Danielle's voice remained calm. My role is analytical. Cole glanced at her again. You understand how this interaction unfolded from our perspective. I understand how perception can be influenced by incomplete information. Hill spoke carefully. The initial stop was based on a minor infraction. Danielle nodded. Yes. Cole hesitated. From there, inconsistencies created concern. Danielle met his gaze. My answers did not change. Ruiz allowed the silence to settle once more, because silence often created space for reflection. Cole's posture had changed now, no longer defensive, no longer assertive, something closer to reconsideration. You asked when compliance became suspicion, he said. Yes. Cole exhaled slowly. Suspicion often forms when expectations are not met. Danielle answered calmly. Expectations should be examined carefully. Hill's expression softened slightly, as though the meaning of the statement had landed more heavily than she expected. Marcus spoke quietly. Training often reveals that assumptions create operational blind spots. Cole nodded faintly, as though acknowledging something difficult but necessary. Ruiz spoke again. This encounter appears resolved. Cole nodded once. Yes. Hill stepped slightly back from the vehicle. Danielle opened the driver's door calmly. Before entering, she paused briefly. Her voice steady, measured. Officer public safety improves when communication is guided by evidence. Cole inclined his head slightly. Understood. Marcus remained silent, allowing the moment to pass without further commentary. Ruiz stepped back toward his vehicle, the quiet authority of his presence now no longer required. Danielle entered her car, slowly placing the folder carefully in the passenger seat. The engine started softly. Normal. Ordinary. Yet nothing about the last 30 minutes had been ordinary. Because the encounter had revealed something far more complex than a traffic violation. It had revealed how quickly perception could shape reality, and how slowly reality corrected perception. As Danielle signaled and prepared to merge back onto the road, Cole watched silently. Not defensive, not dismissive, thoughtful. Because sometimes the most significant consequences of an encounter were not written into reports, but into memory. By the time Danielle Brooks's silver-gray sedan disappeared into the steady flow of late-afternoon traffic, the roadside had returned to its familiar rhythm. Engines passed. Tires hummed across asphalt. The ordinary world resumed its pace, as though nothing unusual had occurred. But for those who had stood on that narrow shoulder of Route 1, the encounter had left an imprint far deeper than a simple procedural stop. Officer Travis Cole remained beside the patrol car for a moment longer than necessary, his hands resting on his duty belt, eyes fixed on the direction Danielle's vehicle had gone. The flashing blue lights reflected faintly across the polished hood of the cruiser, though now they seemed almost excessive against the calm that had settled over the scene. Officer Megan Hill broke the silence first. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Cole exhaled slowly. "Yeah." But the answer lacked conviction. Hill adjusted her radio, though dispatch had already cleared the channel. "That escalated faster than expected," she said. Cole nodded faintly. The federal flag complicated things. Hill studied his expression carefully. That wasn't the only factor. Cole did not respond immediately, because both of them understood the unspoken reality beneath the statement. Perception had shaped the first half of the encounter. Verification had reshaped the second. Cole finally spoke. She maintained composure the entire time. Hill nodded. Unusual level of composure. Cole gave a small breath through his nose. I interpreted that as resistance. Hill tilted her head slightly. I interpreted it as confidence. Cole glanced briefly toward her. Confidence can appear confrontational in uncertain environments. Hill considered that. Or uncertainty can interpret confidence incorrectly. Cole did not respond, because the observation was difficult to dismiss. Behind them, Special Agent Daniel Ruiz spoke briefly into a secure phone before returning to his vehicle. His presence had not been dramatic, but the quiet efficiency of his arrival had reinforced something both officers now recognized. The situation had been larger than it initially appeared. Marcus Hale remained near his pickup truck, watching as Ruiz departed without ceremony. Hill observed him briefly. "You worked with her in operational environments?" she asked. Marcus nodded once. "Yes." Cole approached slightly closer, no longer defensive, but curious. "What exactly does she do?" he asked. Marcus answered carefully. "She ensures systems communicate efficiently when failure is not an option." Cole crossed his arms loosely. "You addressed her as ma'am the moment you arrived." Marcus nodded. "Yes." That level of respect suggested familiarity. Marcus considered the question before answering. In high-pressure environments, respect often reflects trust earned under difficult conditions. Hill studied his expression. "You trust her judgment?" "Yes." Cole exhaled slowly. "Even when a firearm is present." Marcus's answer was simple. "Especially then." Cole's gaze lowered briefly toward the pavement, because the statement carried weight beyond explanation. Hill adjusted her stance. "You mentioned joint advisory environments." Marcus nodded. "Yes." Cole spoke carefully. "Meaning military coordination frameworks." Marcus did not confirm directly, but he did not deny it either. Cole gave a small nod, as though understanding did not require explicit language. Marcus opened the door of his pickup truck, but paused before entering. "Situations like today," he said calmly, "often reveal how quickly perception shapes outcome." Cole met his gaze. "We are trained to anticipate risk." Marcus nodded. "And sometimes risk appears where none exists." Hill crossed her arms lightly. Verification clarified the situation. Marcus inclined his head slightly. "Yes," Cole spoke again. "You did not attempt to override authority." Marcus answered evenly. "That was never my intention." Cole gave a small breath. "You simply remained present." Marcus nodded. "Yes," Hill observed quietly. "That presence changed the trajectory." Marcus did not respond, because some truths did not require reinforcement. Cole finally extended his hand. Marcus accepted the handshake briefly. Professional, respectful, unspoken acknowledgement passed between them. Then Marcus entered his vehicle and closed the door. The pickup truck engine started quietly before merging back onto the road, leaving the officers alone beside their patrol car. For several seconds, neither Cole nor Hill spoke. Finally, Hill broke the silence. "Bodycam captured everything." Cole nodded. "I know." Hill adjusted her radio again, though no transmission followed. "Internal review will probably request footage," she said. Cole gave a small exhale. "Standard procedure." Hill studied him carefully. "You drew your weapon." Cole nodded once. "Yes." Hill spoke gently. "That decision will be evaluated." Cole did not resist the statement, because accountability was part of the profession, and he understood the weight of decisions made within seconds. He rested his hands briefly on the hood of the patrol car, mirroring the posture Danielle had held earlier. A small gesture. Unintentional. Yet symbolic. Hill noticed, but did not comment. Cole finally spoke again. She asked when compliance became suspicion. Hill nodded. That question stays with you. Cole exhaled slowly. Assumptions form quickly. Hill responded carefully, sometimes faster than evidence. Cole gave a small nod. Verification matters. Hill agreed. Yes. Cole's gaze drifted briefly toward the road again. Traffic continued normally. No visible sign remained of the encounter that had unfolded less than 20 minutes earlier. Yet its impact would extend far beyond the roadside. Hill spoke again. Dispatch flagged the stop for documentation review. Cole nodded. That was expected. Hill tilted her head slightly. You handled the de-escalation appropriately once verification occurred. Cole gave a small, humorless breath. That does not erase the earlier moment. Hill did not disagree, because accountability did not depend on outcome alone. Cole finally spoke quietly. Situations like this remind us how much responsibility we carry. Hill nodded. And how important perception becomes. Cole looked once more toward the direction Danielle's vehicle had gone. Not defensive, not resentful, reflective, because the encounter had revealed something more complex than procedural error. It had revealed how easily assumptions could influence interpretation, and how quickly interpretation could influence action. The flashing lights finally powered off, and the roadside returned fully to ordinary life. But the lesson would not fade as quickly. In the days that followed the roadside encounter, the incident did not simply disappear into routine paperwork as many minor traffic stops often did. Instead, the recorded footage dispatch logs and federal verification flags ensured that the situation received careful review from multiple levels of oversight. Not because anyone had requested attention, but because the system itself had already noticed. Officer Travis Cole sat at a plain desk inside the precinct conference room 3 days later, hands resting quietly on a printed summary report. The body camera footage had been reviewed twice already, once by his direct supervisor and again by Internal Affairs. Neither review had been hostile, but neither had been casual. Every movement had been examined. Every instruction replayed, every decision placed under professional scrutiny. Captain Raymond Reynolds stood near the far end of the table, his posture calm but direct, the demeanor of someone accustomed to evaluating complex situations without unnecessary dramatics. The initial stop itself was lawful, Reynolds said evenly. Cole nodded once. Yes, sir. The license plate obstruction provided probable cause for contact. Yes, sir. Reynolds paused briefly before continuing. The escalation point occurred when perceived behavioral indicators were interpreted as potential threat signals. Cole did not argue, because the footage clearly showed the moment tension had shifted. Danielle's composure, her precise answers, her refusal to consent to a search. Each factor had contributed to the perception that something was being concealed. But perception, as the review process emphasized, was not evidence. Internal Affairs investigator Maria Chen sat beside Reynolds, reviewing time-stamped segments on a tablet. At 16:28:14, she noted calmly the subject maintains visible hands and verbally confirms compliance. Cole listened without interruption. At 16:29, 02 subject adjusts stance slightly due to uneven shoulder terrain. Chen tapped the screen gently. At this point, weapon is unholstered. The room remained quiet, not accusatory, but analytical. Reynolds spoke again. Protocol allows for escalation when credible threat indicators are present. Chen added carefully, the review question becomes whether credible indicators were clearly established prior to escalation. Cole inhaled slowly. The subject demonstrated atypical composure, he said. Chen nodded slightly. That observation was noted. Reynolds folded his hands loosely. Composure alone does not constitute probable threat. Cole did not resist the statement, because experience often revealed how quickly interpretation could move ahead of confirmation. Chen scrolled further. The presence of third-party observer Marcus Hale did not interfere with officer procedure. Reynolds nodded. His behavior remained compliant. Chen continued. The subject provided valid federal coordination credentials upon request. Cole spoke quietly. Yes. Reynolds's tone remained neutral. No evidence of criminal activity was found. Yes, sir. Chen looked up from the tablet. The decision to draw a firearm will be reviewed as part of standard escalation protocol assessment. Cole nodded once. Understood. Reynolds leaned slightly forward. This is not a disciplinary hearing. Cole met his gaze. Yes, sir. This is a professional evaluation intended to improve situational interpretation moving forward. Chen added, the review emphasizes how perception interacts with procedural authority. Cole exhaled slowly. Yes, Reynolds spoke carefully. In situations involving cooperative individuals, escalation thresholds must remain grounded in observable risk. Cole nodded again. Yes, sir. Chen placed the tablet gently on the table. The footage confirms the subject maintained consistent compliance. Reynolds continued. The federal liaison verification confirms subject involvement in interagency coordination frameworks. Cole's voice remained steady. Yes. Reynolds allowed a brief pause. This department values officer safety. Yes, sir. And public trust. Cole nodded again. Yes, sir. Chen spoke quietly. Balancing those priorities requires continuous recalibration. Cole gave a small breath. I understand. Reynolds's tone remained measured. The review panel recommends updated training modules focusing on behavioral interpretation under low-threat conditions. Cole accepted the statement without resistance. Yes, sir, Chen added. The goal is to reduce reliance on subjective perception when objective indicators remain neutral. Cole nodded once more. Yes. Reynolds finally leaned back slightly. This evaluation is not punitive. Cole met his gaze. I understand. It is developmental. Yes, sir. Chen offered a small professional nod. Situations involving federal coordination personnel rarely occur during traffic stops. Cole allowed the faintest hint of acknowledgement. No, ma'am, Reynolds concluded calmly. Documentation will reflect procedural compliance with recommendations for additional situational calibration training. Cole exhaled slowly. Yes, sir. Meanwhile, Danielle Brooks had returned to her normal professional routine with little visible disruption. Her work continued to involve analytical modeling coordination, review preparation, and advisory participation in simulation frameworks designed to prevent breakdowns in complex response systems. She did not seek public attention. She did not pursue complaint filings. She did not provide media interviews. Her focus remained unchanged. Efficiency, accuracy, preparedness. Marcus Hale returned to his own operational responsibilities, reviewing risk assessments and advising teams tasked with evaluating high-pressure decision environments. The roadside encounter became a quiet reference point during one internal seminar addressing behavioral interpretation under uncertainty. No names were mentioned. No individuals were singled out. Only principles discussed, because the lesson extended beyond any single moment. It reflected the ongoing challenge of balancing vigilance with objectivity. Within the precinct, Officer Cole completed the recommended training modules over the following weeks: scenario-based simulations, decision calibration exercises, situational interpretation reviews. Not as punishment, as refinement, because law enforcement required constant adjustment to evolving realities. Hill continued active patrol duty, her observational awareness sharpened by the experience. Neither officer spoke publicly about the incident, but both carried the memory forward as part of professional growth, because experience often shaped judgment more effectively than instruction alone. And sometimes the most significant outcomes of an encounter were not visible to the public, but deeply embedded in the way future decisions were made. Several weeks after the roadside encounter, life appeared to continue exactly as it had before, at least on the surface. Traffic still flowed steadily along Route 1. Morning commuters still stopped for coffee at the same corner cafes. Patrol vehicles still moved through the city streets with quiet vigilance. The rhythm of daily routine remained unchanged. But beneath the familiar patterns, something subtle had shifted. Not loudly, not publicly, but meaningfully. Danielle Brooks sat at her desk early one Thursday morning, the soft glow of her monitor illuminating lines of data organized with the same clarity that defined every part of her professional approach. Columns of timestamps, logistical sequencing models, response probability matrices. Each number represented the difference between delay and coordination, between confusion and clarity, between risk and resolution. Her work did not involve recognition. It did not involve public acknowledgement, but its impact extended quietly across systems designed to function when unpredictability threatened stability. She preferred it that way, because effectiveness did not require visibility. It required precision. Across the city, Officer Megan Hill reviewed updated department training materials addressing perception bias and decision calibration under ambiguous conditions. Scenario simulations demonstrated how quickly incomplete information could shape interpretation. Case studies emphasized the importance of observable behavior over assumed intent. Hill studied each example carefully, not defensively, not skeptically, but thoughtfully, because professional growth required honest evaluation. Officer Travis Cole completed the final module of the recommended situational recalibration program the same week. The training did not criticize. It clarified. It demonstrated how quickly the human mind attempted to fill gaps in understanding with assumptions shaped by prior experiences, and how those assumptions left unchecked could influence decision-making in ways rarely recognized in real time. Cole paused at one particular section, emphasizing a simple principle. Confidence does not equal threat. Composure does not equal defiance. Professional tone does not equal resistance. Sometimes calm is simply calm. The statement remained with him long after the training concluded, because experience had now attached meaning to the words. Meanwhile, Marcus Hale attended a small briefing session with a team responsible for evaluating operational readiness protocols. The discussion focused on communication clarity during high-pressure interactions. One slide displayed a single phrase: "Clarity reduces escalation." Marcus allowed the memory of the roadside moment to pass through his thoughts without attachment, because the purpose of experience was not to dwell on discomfort. It was to improve outcomes moving forward. Later that afternoon, Danielle received a short encrypted message confirming adjustments to a simulation timeline for an upcoming interagency coordination exercise. The language was technical, concise, unemotional, exactly as expected. Her response was equally concise. Acknowledged. Timeline reviewed. Optimization parameters updated. Professional routine continued. Yet, somewhere within the quiet continuity of her day, the memory of the roadside question remained present. At what point does compliance become suspicion? It was not a question directed only at one officer. It was a question directed at systems, at habits, at human perception itself. Because misunderstanding rarely began with hostility. It often began with assumption, and assumptions once formed could shape interpretation before evidence had an opportunity to speak. One evening, Hill encountered a new trainee during a routine patrol briefing. The trainee asked a simple question. How do you know when a situation is becoming dangerous? Hill paused thoughtfully before answering. You observe behavior first, she said, not expectation. The trainee nodded, absorbing the guidance without yet fully understanding its significance. Experience would provide the rest. Weeks passed. No headlines appeared. No viral footage circulated widely. No public controversy erupted. Yet the impact of the encounter extended quietly through professional environments where decision-making influenced outcomes far beyond individual moments. Danielle continued her work. Marcus continued his advisory role. Hill continued patrol. Cole continued service. But each carried forward an awareness shaped by one shared experience. Respect does not require credentials. Dignity does not require verification. And composure should never be mistaken for concealment. Because the most powerful transformations often occur not through dramatic confrontation, but through quiet reconsideration. The roadside encounter had not changed the world, but it had changed perspective. And perspective once expanded rarely returns to its previous boundaries. Sometimes progress begins with a single question asked calmly in a moment of tension. Sometimes accountability begins with listening rather than defending. And sometimes the most meaningful justice occurs not in courtrooms, but in the decisions made differently the next time uncertainty appears. Because fairness is not a single outcome. It is a continuous commitment. One decision at a time, one interaction at a time, one moment of awareness at a time. And every person deserves to be seen clearly before being judged quickly.